and welcome to today's Rough Generations and Schaalman Senior Voices event. Rough Generations and Schaalman Senior Voices and the Center for Excellence in Aging is delighted to be the source of information, resources, health promotion programs that help maximize our well-being and good health as we age. Today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. I'm Grisel Rodriguez Morales, Rough Generations Program Director, and I'll be the moderator for today's event, which is Spirituality and Aging, Embracing Everyday Miracles. We're going to hear from our fabulous speaker today first, and then we'll open it for a discussion. And a discussion means that we want to hear from you and invite you. Yes, Rabbi Michael Sedek has been the spiritual leader at two great congregations and now serves as Rabbi Emeritus of both Temple B'nai Yehuda in Kansas City and Emmanuel Congregation here in Chicago. He is currently the Rabbi in Residence at St. Paul's School of Theology and a dedicated community activist, scholar, and teacher. Rabbi Sedek has received numerous awards, including a Fulbright Case grant for advanced study in the United Kingdom. He's blushing. Sorry. Hang in there, Rabbi.
I know this person.
He has been a frequent presenter at venues throughout the world, including Bangkok, Hong Kong, Florence, Italy, South Africa, Berlin, Moscow, and Warsaw. And he's the author of a number of popular and scholarly articles, and his first book, Taking Miracles Seriously, I have my copy here, and which just went into second printing, so congratulations for that.
Thank you. What we're going to try to do is I'm going to talk for somewhere between 10 and 12 minutes, because I believe in miracles. And then the second, Grisel and I will try to build a conversation, and hopefully many of you will have comments, commentaries, alternative speeches, etc. And I'm grateful to be here. You know, every speaker has some response to introductions, so you're welcome to use this one without attribution. Ready? Grisel, of all the introductions I've ever received, that's the most recent. Now, I mentioned that, and thank you those of you who responded with a chuckle, because I don't think the notion of serious and severe are synonyms. Serious can also have joy and involvement and uplift, and maybe even a laugh or two, or as I'm about to suggest, in what I hope will be not just amusing, but also engaging and also informative, and maybe challenging as well. So, to begin, buy the book. Oh, by the way, at the moment it's only on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com or from the publisher Southern House Books. That said, to work. How many of you are old enough to remember Mr. Ed? How many of you? The talking horse from the golden age of situation comedies on television. And I don't do many impressions, but here we go. You ready? When Mr. Ed introduces himself to Wilbur, pretty good, right? Right. Wilbur is probably nonplussed, right? Because it's not in our experience for horses to talk, let alone have the best lines in classic situation comedies. But the Hebrew Bible has an exact equivalent. Balaam and his talking donkey or jackass, and he has a conversation with this talking animal as though it were a perfectly normal, everyday kind of thing. Now, it may be that the text is trying to suggest who is the real jerk here. But on a deeper level, principle number one, every time in the Hebrew Bible what you or I would call a miracle occurs, no one draws the correct lesson, which may very well be the deep heart lesson. To be clearer, the text says it takes 10 plagues, where we were on the threshold of Passover and Easter. The text says it took 10 plagues to get the children of Israel out of Egypt, right? Yes. Everybody remembers that with nightmare or otherwise when they're learning in Sunday schools. Now, 10 plagues. Your Pharaoh wouldn't one or two at most been enough to say, I can cut my losses. It's going to work out really well. But the text says it takes 10, and lo and behold, the old Brenner, Pharaoh, changes his mind. He goes after them. The first problem, of course, no firstborn horses, because they're all dead, according to the 10th plague. No firstborn soldiers, because they're all dead, but big deal. Why would you let facts get in the way of a good story? What happens? By the way, rabbinic tradition, the tradition of which I'm a part, embraces thousands of plagues, which is their way of saying, watch out. Every time a so-called miracle occurs, no one draws the correct lesson. The Israelites go out into the desert. They're stuck at Yam Suf. That's Hebrew for the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, Sea of Reeds, a low-lying isthmus. We used to call it the Isthmus of Suez. It's not there anymore. They built a canal because that's where you built canals in swampy, low-lying areas. So, as you know, the children of Israel are stuck there, and they see the dust cloud of the Egyptian tanks, ancient equivalent, chariots, coming to get them. And then they say something they'll say over and over again. Why'd you bring us out here to die? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? Why don't they say, look at these stupid Egyptians. We got God playing on our team, and they're going to think they're going to do something? Then the text says, Moses turns to the people. I do a good Charlton Heston. Here it is. Be still and see the workings of the Lord. Then the text says, Moses turns to God, and the text says, God says, I don't know what God says. I know what the text says. Why do you cry out to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. And that may be the real essential miracle, that they go forward. But meantime, let's get back to the story. Sea splits, right? And they walk through on dry ground. There's always a hint or clue. Shouldn't there be mud? Sea split, they walk through on dry ground. Wow. So it's two miracles instead of one if you want to stick with a literal meaning. The Israelites passed through in safety. By the way, if the translated number is 3 million, it would have taken days and days and days, but no big deal. You're an Egyptian chariot driver. You're held back by a whirlwind of fire. The Israelites get through, and lo and behold, the whirlwind of fire disappears. And what happens? You're an Egyptian chariot driver. You're going to drive in there? You got to be out of your freaking mind. But the text says they do, and then always a hint or clue. Then the children of Israel beheld Mitzrayim. For those whose Hebrew is rusty, Mitzrayim means Egypt, not Egyptians. Then they beheld Egypt dead on the shore of the sea. But the next phrase is even more important. Then they had mistranslated faith. It really means confidence in God and in Moses, God's servant, until the next chapter. Why'd you bring us out here to die? Weren't there enough graves? We don't have no water. And as you know, they put the rock, water, ta-da! Everything's fine. We have no food. Nobody's serving us lunch. And they get man. Now, that's got to be the Hebrew Bible's attempt at humor. The text says, I'm not making this up. My fingers are never going to leave my hand. Text says they called it manna because they looked at it and said, manhu. That's archaic Hebrew for, what is it? Now, by the way, there are speculations as to what it might have been. The usings of the tapestry, source of protein, it grows in the Sinai, or much worse. I hope you don't ruin anyone's appetite. It could be bird droppings. There's a tribe, a native group in Ecuador for whom their fundamental source of protein is bird guano. And as it happens, because the next miracle is going to be important to this story, lo and behold, they get sick of manna. We've cooked it everywhere we can. We want meat. In Egypt, we had leeks and onions. I'm quoting, leeks and onions and garlic. Why did you bring us out here to die? They also had cucumbers. So, the next day, the camp is surrounded by boys. I'm from Brooklyn. That's how we pronounce the correct pronunciation for birds. Well, I've actually gotten the least. So, they're exhausted. You don't even have to hunt them. Just pick them up and put them in the oven. The pattern is the point. By the way, this is a miracle that happens every year in the Sinai. It's one of the world's great natural bird flyways. Those birds have been flying nonstop over the Mediterranean, no rest stops. They plop down because they're going further into Africa. At any rate, they get to Mount Sinai. And in the single greatest personal appearance in all of human history, God is experienced by the entire people. Now, wherever you are with the word God, and maybe in the discussion we can talk a little bit about that. Let's just take the story. But they have an experience that's transformative, where they've encountered a sacred dimension. Wow, Moses was up on the mountain, and these people build a golden calf. And not only do they build a golden calf, they say to this golden calf, which they just made, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Either these are the dumbest people to ever walk the face of the earth, or there's something more, something deeper going on here. Now, obviously, I subscribe to the notion that there's a great deal more deeper and multivalent meanings going on. For instance, Martin Luther King Jr.'s understanding of these stories, and note that's an important word, use the word stories, is that these stories reveal that it is easier to get the slaves out of Egypt than they get Egypt out of the slaves. That is always true, whether it's a movement for a people's or an individual's embrace of freedom. We are free before we accept or want the responsibility for being in charge of our own lives. The book and our conversation today is dedicated to another notion. People are free to disbelieve the evidence of their own experience. People are free to disbelieve the evidence of their own experience. Part of the problem is what we mean when we say miracle. Because if I were to ask you for a definition, you'd probably use some kind of supernatural intervention into the regular routine of experience. Fair? Would it shock you? There's no such word in the Hebrew Bible for that meaning of miracle. There are words we translate as miracle, but they don't mean supernatural intervention. Three most common words: nes, which means a sign or a symbol. What are signs or symbols? They point to something else, something more, something deeper, perhaps. Or as a poet once said, what lies before us and what lies behind us are small matters compared to what lies within us, if only we would recognize the signs and wonders within us. Next word, od. Od is the Hebrew word for a letter of the alphabet. What are letters of the alphabet? They're signs, symbols that we've agreed on that that's O. Why not have this means O? We've decided, agreed, that this means O. The next word is pele, my favorite. It means a wow or a wonder. What isn't a wow or a wonder if one would essentially understand this very brief miracle that we are custodians of that we call life? And it is a very brief one, that's for sure. Part of the problem is we're all dualists. We divide our experience into ordinary and extraordinary. And what do we do with the extraordinary? We have no choices. It says, pay attention. We cannot but pay attention. And what do we do with the ordinary? We take it for granted. If we were to take the ordinary for granted less, our lives would be more filled with life. Now, there's a lot of stuff after that. I'm just going to make two suggestions of formulae that work for me in trying to take the ordinary for granted less, or to put it in poetic form. One of my favorite poets, Franco, like this, so I'm going to give it for him. Earth's crammed with heaven. Every bush is afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round and pluck blackberries. If I could have a conversation with Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote that poem from a wheelchair, I would say, but Betty, when you're just plucking blackberries, properly understood, it's a burning bush. There are burning bushes scattered randomly through every day. And what do? I ignore them, but I ignore them less. So Henry James, be among those upon whom nothing is lost. We're all or nothingness. That's part of the problem. We can be among those upon whom less is lost. So two suggestions, and then I'm going to pause for Grizel and I to play games with you. Story number one, true story. I know a woman whose mother was imprisoned in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in World War II in Indonesia. 80% of her fellow inmates did not survive. Mother was an exception who lived into her 90s. The daughter always marveled that despite those circumstances, a circumstance that would reduce more than a few people to despair and cynicism and a notion that this is full of sound and fury and it signifies nothing. Her mother still had an enthusiasm. What's your secret? I'll explain. Her mother offered three things. I'm a rabbi, I added a fourth. Every day of my imprisonment and every day thereafter, I would try to do three things. I would try to hear something beautiful, say something beautiful, and see something beautiful. I've added to do something beautiful. Every night before I'm at the age and stage of life where I'd attempt to sleep, I asked myself those 4 questions. Did I see, hear, say, and do something beautiful? If the answer to any one of them is no, I have to get up because my real work, my soul, SOUL work for the day isn't done. I promise you, the more you do it, the more those moments, those burning bushes are present and you are aware of them and you can embrace this journey we call life more fully so that the ordinary is filled with extraordinary. Last story, true story. In 1974, some of you vaguely remember it, I had just become a rabbi and I was in Kansas City, Missouri, where I returned after finishing my tenure in Chicago. And I was studying every week with a rabbi who was blind. I would read to him. And after we were done reading, the real lessons began. He said to me, Michael, when do you say the Shechechlianu prayer? If you get that prayer, and you may have a Jewish background. The Shechechlianu prayer in English is praise to you, eternal our God, who of the universe, who has kept us in life, sustained us, and brought us to this special moment. I had just gotten out of seminary. I knew more than I was ever going to know, right? So I said to him the answer. When you're doing something for the first time or the first time in season, he said, wrong. It's just first time in season. First time you've never done it before. To recognize the wonder of this moment that you could just take for granted, you do this prayer. It's a wake-up call. First time in season, first night of Hanukkah, the Shechechlianu prayer, but not the second night because it's not the first time in season. Got it? I said it. He said, let your ears hear what your mouth has spoken. You're doing it the first time in season. Then the next thing he said changed my life. He said, Michael, when are you not doing something for the first time? And ever since, right back, he was a small, beautiful, wonderful, mischievous man. I do it in Hebrew. Praise you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us life, sustained us, brought us this special day. Praise you, eternal God. I can get through one before it's time for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Now, I'll admit to you, there are times when it's just background noise. But then there are moments when it is breakthrough. And I am among those upon whom less is lost for this very brief moment before eternity that we call life. I'm going to pause there. I got a million of them to quote Milton Monroe. But let's get started with conversation. Oh, you can tepidly pause.
Let's move the chairs a little bit. I don't know what's happening with this camera. We're here.
We're going to move this out,
We're
right?
here. That's good. I want the microphone as well so that we can do there. Oh, or even better. Okay. Hello? Hello. Thank you so much. I can have this here then. You're good. All right. Well, as I hinted earlier today, I'm going to start with one passage from your book, Taking Miracles Seriously, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality.
By the way, before you do, my title was Miracles of the Ordinary, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality. The book agent changed it to Hiding in Plain Sight, A Journey to Everyday Spirituality. And the only thing that really matters is the publisher who came up with the title. And it's ambiguous. Taking miracles seriously, you might think that I'm a literalist. I am not a literalist. That is to miss the meanings in these texts.
How do you handle all that change? I mean,
you
had a title. Yeah. But yes, let me read the you will see when I pull up very quickly. Okay.
Okay.
And I'll connect it with what you just said. But no cheating. You wrote the book. You should know what is here. So it says prayer, art, music, a rainbow, children's laughter, a mother's tears, a friend's embrace, even a visit to the toilet. All and more are moments in which we may recognize that behind appearances there is always, and perhaps only, the infinite or divine. We are surrounded by wonder and miracle. So as you said,
I believe that.
You believe that so much that you wrote it. So you said we need to pay attention, right? If we cannot ignore what's happening around us. We cannot or should not be ignoring the burning bushes around us. I'm trying to not be political, but anyway, so knowing that, then, and how is it that we want to live an extended life, you know? How can we replenish our soul so that we can deal with those burning bushes and continue exploring and acknowledging and even enjoying all those miracles around us?
Yeah, that's an easy question. And there are a circuit of responses, and notice I use the word responses. I use the word answer. I don't have answers. I have responses. And the first thing that came to mind, true story. I think it may even be in the book. I was in my office doing administrivia, which I hate. And I get a phone call from the chaplaincy department of a hospital saying, there's a patient we'd like you to see. Now, I didn't have the good sense to say, does she want to see a rabbi? The chaplaincy department was passing it off on me, as it turned out. But someone needs me. Oh boy. I rushed to the hospital. I had a feeling, as soon as I walked in the room, I knew I was in trouble. You know, there was something about this setting. Coco Chanel, not a very fine person in her own life, has a comment. By the time you're age 50, you have the face you deserve. Now, had this woman been a book, I wasn't going to go past the cover. She was marinated in rage. She was angry at the doctors because they weren't going to get her well quickly enough to suit her demanding schedule. She was angry at the nurses because they were tending to more seriously ill individuals. She was angry at God because God seemed to think I served a purpose. That's what got her in the hospital. And she was angry at me because I walked into the room. If I did anything for her, it was just another place to unload, right? Renewable resources, it seemed to me. I was in the hospital anyway, and I knew there was a particular person whom I was visiting regularly. This was a woman paralyzed from the neck down. I walked into her room. She smiled at me. That was 36 years ago. And it's as though I can see her right now. Where did she get the audacity to smile? Her circumstances were far worse than this other woman, and she still thought she could make a difference. So much so that I'm telling you this story now. That night, as was my habit, because a couple of people were who heard me from the pulpit occasionally, I very much tried never to repeat a story. So I was constantly reading and reading, looking for illustrations. I found the following in an essay. The difference between fate and destiny. Fate is the cards we are dealt. Destiny is how we play the cards we are dealt. She had a lousy hand. My God, was she playing the heck out of those cards. A little later in the same essay, tells a story. Two children are playing in a garden. First child comes rushing in and says, Mommy, what a cool place the garden is. All the rose bushes have thorns on them. Other child comes rushing in and says, Mommy, what a beautiful place the garden is. All the thorn bushes have roses on them. And that's more than just reframing. The truth of the matter is, you all know this, life resembles thorn bush much more than rose bush. But thank God there are roses. Some of us, I do not understand how it is that it happens, but I do know there are people who get a metaphorical hangnail and their whole world falls apart. And you and I know people who endure endless numbers of challenges and difficulties and debilitations, and still they think the journey is worth it. I want to be in that company, whatever the circumstance may be. Now, how to get more of it, I know the story of my father.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Trying to become the adult I hope to become someday started with my father's death when I was 18. He knew he was going to die, cancer diagnosis. And rather than my drawing what might be the obvious lesson, life sucks. It can't be trusted. What's the point of loving someone? You're only going to lose them. He taught me what I consider the four most important lessons to inform my life. Lesson number one, life is a very precious and fragile gift. Self-evident, right? Needs no elaboration. Lesson number 2, I mean this. Were I to die today, I want more. I am so freaking intoxicated with the gift of life, to quote another poet in the St. Vincent Millay, "O life, I cannot hold you close enough." Lesson number 3, I mean this. Were I to die today, what would be enough to say thank you? I want more, but if this is all I get, we're on the threshold of Passover, Dayenu, it would be enough. Lesson number 4, I'd rather have my father than I've learned any of it. I can't have that, but I can have what his life still means in me. And guess what? That's the only thing we can be guaranteed. The people we interact with. What at the end of our journey will our life have meant in them, inform them, inspire them? That's a good word, inspire. You know what it means? It means to take in the spirit. Inspiration, expiration. That's all we do. I could go on, but I'm not going. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's important then also to make sure that we are not only paying attention to the bushes, but then paying attention to how we want to approach life. I mean, I know that you talk in the book about the importance of being fully present, not only thinking about when is the next birthday or the next thing, big thing, things like that. So being present is good. So we'll talk about that, but I cannot help but connecting with that story that you said. In my case, and I needed that because I've been just recently with my colleagues talking a lot about how do we continue to wake up every day and feel like, you know, we're gonna be able to handle it and the work that we do is important and so on. And one small thing, but it's important to me, my father also 15 years ago died of that cancer diagnosis. And to the last day, as he was going into treatment, first of all, he dressed up always nicely to go there, but also not for him, but those around him. But it was buenos dias, like everybody, good morning, and how are you doing? And the person in the front desk, maybe they responded in a way, you know, you're busy in clinic and you want to get your name, what time is your appointment? How are you doing? So saying buenos dias or good morning to people that at times are not expecting it. They are sometimes cleaning the floor. That's a way of honoring him, but also it's important to me. And you know, it helps. It's there's something that flourishes from that simple act. So thank you for that. Before I move into some questions that I will receive, anybody in the room has a comment, a question? Okay.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
I wondered if you could speak to why you decided to write this 2 years ago.
Many years ago, I was giving a speech in Santa Fe, New Mexico to a group. And after the speech, there was dinner, and I was seated next to an individual. And so what do you do? I'm the CEO of a place called Rancho La Puerta in Tecate, Mexico. Rancho La Puerta is the oldest spirituality retreat center in North America. And by the way, making a political comment for a moment, the only reason it's Tecate, Mexico, is that one of the 2 founders was a Jewish refugee from Hungary. He couldn't get into the United States because that was another one of those moments where we feared those who were different. Now, back to the point. This young person was the CEO of this org. He said, "You're always looking for interesting speakers. Would you be interested in coming to speak?" And my wife kicked me under the table, which I understood meant I was supposed to say yes. Yeah. So I said yes, and said, "Well, in return for 3 lectures, we'll give you the place for free." So I only had the lecture I gave. So, you know, I've been thinking a lot about everyday spirituality. Maybe I can put together a lecture, which I called Miracles of the Ordinary. And I gave it, and over time it developed, and people kept on, "Why don't you write this up already? Why don't you write this up already? And after 20 something years, I was writing and avoiding it. And finally, it was either do it or you don't do it. Interestingly, if any of you have written, on some days I would look at what I'd written and say, "This is really good." then on some days I look at the same thing and say, oh, what trash. And part of the problem is you're out there naked and you don't have an opportunity to defend yourself in terms of elaboration. For instance, in terms of being present, three thoughts. In the Hebrew Bible, Moses is told, go up to the top of the mountain and be there. And why the heck does he have to be told, not just, if he's going up to the top of the mountain, where else would he be? But as soon as I say that, where it's plenty of times we're someplace we're not there. I bet some of us are already worried about what we've got coming this afternoon or what happened yesterday, right? As opposed to being in the moment, because there'll be more than enough time to take care of the next moment. But just to be in the present moment. Different story. Good story. How many know the name Martin Buber? Martin Buber was a really remarkable theologian of the previous century. It's hard for me to say previous century. And he tells a story of himself. He was a professor. A student came to see him. He was doing his morning prayers. And the student came to see him. He said, please wait until I finish. The student didn't wait. He found out later that the student took his own life. And he wrote, here I had a chance to meet God. In prayer. Because the real ways we encounter more than itself is when we're interacting with each other. When Jacob becomes Israel in the Hebrew Bible, it says, because you have wrestled with God and with persons, and you are competent. Now, he wrestled with a man, the text says. How can you then say he wrestled with God? Because he then names the place Peniel, face of God. When we really encounter the other, we're getting as close as we're going to get to holiness, to the sacred, or to use the old-fashioned word, which is a much abused word, God. I'd be happy to talk about that problem as well, but that's a long-winded answer for why I wrote the book. My wife insisted.
Question from the audience?
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, Susan.
I always have been inspired by what you were saying. And I was thinking about how much faster society is now and how many more distractions we have. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how what you're suggesting has gotten so much harder, let's say, for people in the last, say, 20 years since the invention of the internet. I use every day. I'm not, but it just seems to me that the world has changed and there are more things to make what you're talking about difficult.
One of the serious questions, why bother with this? What's what many religious spiritual traditions call mindfulness? Because a lot of stuff does get in the way. I'm going to just cite three. One, we have far more skill at making a living than we do at making a life. Two ways. One of the things I wanted to put in the book was a wonderful New Yorker cartoon, but they wanted $600. So I described the cartoon instead of paying $600. It's two people at the beach. And since it's the New Yorker, it's clearly they're at the Hamptons, right? And each of them has an adult beverage. And one says to the other, this is perfect. I could stay like this for the next 5 seconds. We don't give ourselves permission to be. We've got to be doing. Second thing that gets in the way, we're addicted to the quick fix, which is why the internet is so effective, right? I did 20 minutes of meditation. How come I haven't had enlightenment? I did a week of abdominal exercise. Where's my six-pack? Although I now know we have to have an eight-pack. It's worse. The quick fix. 2 comments from culture. Jim Morrison. We want the world and we want it now. But poor Carrie Fisher made it even worse. Instant gratification isn't quick enough. Deeper. There's a lack of comfortability in our own skin. We really do sabotage ourselves regularly. So to put it in, we are ceaseless wanderers. Or to put it in Groucho Marxian terms, I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. Or to put it in psychological terms, I mentioned Dr. Carl Rogers, one of the great founders of humanistic psychology. It is a curious paradox that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. But the challenge is our willingness to do that. Because to accept myself as I am means flaw and foible and ambitions that will never be fulfilled and all kinds of stuff, which magically, if I can just accept that, I get more of the better and less of the worse. But we don't want that yet. Maybe today's the day when we finally will. That's some of what I would say.
Oh, I need to then go to, one comment that was made very wisely by Rabbi Herman Schaalman, and bringing the aging piece in here. He said, and we put it in many of the things that we do for Schaalman Senior Voices, he very wisely said, we are going to be aging, all of us, whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not, that's for sure.
Whether we like it or not. But the question that then he posed to us is, what can we do to like it? So what can be done to like it? So what are some of the ways in which, spirituality can help us or foster a sense of meaning in later stages in life? Or what are some of the things that we can do in order for continuing to embrace all the wonders and miracles?
First answer is I don't know. But that's not going to stop me. First thing that comes to mind is common attributed to the Dalai Lama. Someone said to him, given all the suffering and pain of your people, how do you explain that you still have joy? And he said, what else would you suggest? I can make this a sentence to endure, or I can make it a sacred pilgrimage. Now, part of the problem in our society is that the real idolatry of America is materialism. The absolute certain conviction that if I just have enough stuff, I'll find a metaphorical salvation. It's an anti-God, and it always demands human sacrifice. The sacredness of the journey is implicit in any and every action, whether I like what I'm experiencing or not. How do I find the blessing in it? I didn't want my father to die. But what's the blessing I can continue to take from it as long as I have the breath and the awareness to find the blessing in it? I've known more than a few people who were, when I'm dealing with a dying patient, one of the things I'll suggest is, please continue to recognize you can make an incredible difference in people's lives. Besides, there'll be more than enough time to be dead when you're dead. In fact, an eternity of time. We just have this brief moment that we call life. And my mother was 104. My father was 58. In the scope of eternity, it's less than a blink of an eye for both of them and for me. In a Jewish cemetery where there's Hebrew on the markers, you will see, whether you recognize it or not, niftar. It's usually translated departed and then the date. Niftar means to be exempt or to be discharged from service. While we're here, report for duty. Whatever the task, whatever the responsibility. Now, I don't want suffering. I don't want the reward of suffering. But if that is my lot, how can I find what will make a difference for others and me in it? That's the best I've got at the moment. I'm sure if I've given enough hours, I could come up with something that might make more sense.
Well, I like that. While we're here, report for duty. So, because duty sometimes is also what makes, we make an impact in the life of others, but also it's very rewarding to us. So.
And I wouldn't mind getting an honorable discharge.
Hello, I'm Janine, and I'm with results too, and so moved by your yeah. So I just wanted to share that I grew up in New York City. My mother grew up
Overall.
Manhattan.
Brooklyn.
Oh, okay. I'll be in Brooklyn this fall for a wedding. So long story short, my mother grew up in McAllen, Texas. She is Spanish Mexican, and my father grew up in New Jersey. she was raised kind of Protestant / Catholic. My father was Jewish, but he didn't really observe. So when I was growing up in New York, we went to the church, Marble Collegiate, and Dr. Norman Vitzapia, I remember him vaguely as I was young, but
The power of positive thinking for those who.
yes, and his successor, Dr. Arthur Caliandro, became a dear family friend of ours. And so my father never talked about his heritage because my mother was very present in hers. So I grew up. So flash forward, I'm married. I have children, and I'm invited to the first bar mitzvah that I've ever been to. And when it came to the ceremony and they're passing the Torah, I started weeping. I was just weeping like I didn't know if I was embarrassed with people, but when I had time to reflect on it afterwards, I realized that there was a part of me that was in that faith, but I had followed the journey, which I was grateful for how I was raised as a Protestant. But it has always reminded me that there is that part of me that I want to continue exploring, and also to honor the roots of my father, even though for some reason he did not embrace his Jewish heritage like his sisters did.
If I may comment, because one, it seems to me that the story that comes to mind. There are in Jewish tradition, there's a notion. There's two. By the way, human beings are the only mammals who can cry because of their feelings. All mammals have tear ducts, but we're the only ones who, for joy or sadness. There's got to be a gift. The story is there are two kinds of tears. I'll show off my Hebrew. Dema'od shel Ashan and dema'od shel Pirot. Tears that go up in smoke and tears that bear fruit. So I would encourage you to, can you reframe them to be tears that go up and bear fruit? I suspect that one of the things that you were responding to was an unexplored territory that you knew but vaguely, and that opened a door, whether you ever walk through that door or not. You know, and I don't need you to walk through that door unless you need or want to, just to explore a small conviction. I believe religions are languages to holiness. When one worships their religion, they're engaged in idolatry, which is to say, if the only religion is mine, first of all, you're making God into a monster, because that means that God is condemning to eternal damnation those who aren't in the right club. You know? And second, if that's the God there is, I don't want to be in that company. And I would even argue that it's entirely possible that Judaism is the only correct one, because we've been in this business longer than most anybody else, right? But I would turn in my membership card, gladly. I don't want to spend eternity with a monster. Assuming for a moment that after we leave this life, there is such a thing. And notice I said assuming, I don't know. But tears are a good thing. I wouldn't second guess them.
I think that what I'm also now connecting is that there's religion, but then there's also the spirituality. And then I wonder about how is it that we can, if we haven't embraced a religion or if we haven't embraced spirituality, how can we do that at this stage of our lives, including, at this stage?
My wheelhouse. First, I would argue everybody's religious. There are really only two religions. There's a religion that says life is precious and meaningful, and there's a religion that says life sucks. You'd be amazed how many people belong to that second religion. The languages of what we call religion are Jewish, Protestant, etc., Greek Orthodox, Muslim, etc. Now, people People say Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote this. We can't find where he wrote it, but it's attributed to him. What the heck? It's the following. Because we think it's God or no God, religion or no religion, right? And then I'll deal about spirituality in a second. The gods we worship write their names upon our faces. And be sure of it, we will worship some. We may think that our worship is carried out in secret, but it behooves us to be careful what we are worshiping. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. So it's not God or no God, it's what will the ultimate reality of your life be that you would dedicate your life to. That's your God. Spirituality. After you buy my book, a book that I would recommend, but you gotta buy my book first. The Spirituality of Imperfection. What it does, and some of you know the book? It takes the 12 steps of AA, compares it to Sufi stories, which is Islamic mysticism, early church fathers, and Hasidic tales. You don't have to read the book. All the stories are in boldface. And in it, he said, religion is for people, I don't believe this, by the way, but the book said, religion is for people who are frightened of going to hell. Spirituality is for people who've been there. All of us have been there in our own personal struggle, wrestling, pain, disappointment. So that's why I would say all of us are in fact religious. The religion may be very privatistic, or we need community. Richard Leakey of the famous anthropology family once said, he was asked at a press conference, can you summarize everything you ever learned in one sentence? And rather than saying, what are you, an idiot? He said, I can do it. One monkey is no monkey. We live in communities or we cannot survive, we cannot thrive. We cannot be fully human without the other. I need you. You need me. When we get to that, we've reported for duty.
So wonderful, I mean, especially now with the, epidemic of loneliness and social isolation, and how is it getting even more difficult for us to make connections and,
That's the internet for you.
yes, in particular with those that, didn't have a chance before to play in the plaza or, have that opportunity to make connections in different ways, but I can talk with you so long. Yes.
Ooh.
That. But anyway.
I'm able to stay for a few minutes if people want some private conversations.
Absolutely, but they're not gonna be difficult. But yes, this is a book. So there you have even a camera there was good for us. Okay, people. So.
But it's a really lovely cover. I didn't design it. It's a burning bush.
Yeah.
Can I take an extra second?
Yes, go ahead.
What would you say if before I got in here, there was a bush, it was on fire, and it didn't burn up, and it talked to me? Ask me that later.
They sent him to the shrink board.
We can talk about that another time.
Yeah, right.
Well, but thank you. But
Thank
then
you.
one, well, that was a mic drop, but anything, give me one miracle that you noticed today. And it's only 12 o'clock, not 1 o'clock.
Oh, that was, you mentioned in that little thing, even going to the bathroom. I was successful. And we only pay attention to our plumbing when it's not working, right? And how about how awesomely and wondrously we are made? The 150th Psalm, which in most Psalm books is the last Psalm. But the last line, there's a whole bunch of musical instruments. Praise God with this, praise God with that. And the last line is let all that has the breath praise God. Now, we're the ones who have the breath, right? Either it destroys the parallelism, which is the heart of biblical traditions, that we're just musical instruments. We move because the breath of life moves through us. And for a brief time, custodian of that breath. That all that, so the prayer that Jewish tradition has for going to the bathroom is praise to you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who has fashioned me in wondrous manner, with openings and closings, And if that which were to be open were to be closed, and if that which were to be closed were to be open, I could not stand before you. Praised are you, eternal our God, who does wonders to perform. It's a prayer about defecation and urination. That was my first miracle today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and
Thank
thank
you.
you all of you for joining us. Give me 90 seconds of your time. I know that you have to get to your patients, your clients, your next meetings, all of that. But Hannah is gonna help us get to upcoming programmings. In May, we have Older Americans Month. And the theme this year is flipping or flip the script on aging, which focuses on transforming how society perceives, talks about, and approaches aging. And Rough Generations will be hosting events this month or next month to celebrate, including our annual Schaalman Senior Voices Thought Leader Lecture and Health Fair. So Unmasking Ageism is gonna be the title of our annual Schaalman Senior Voices Thought Leader Lecture. Dr. Tracy Gentron, author of Ageism Unmasked, Exploring Age Bias and How to End It, will educate us about ageism and ableism, talk about elderhood as a unique stage of the development, and discuss strategies that we can use to address ageism whenever and wherever we encounter it. We hope to see you here. It's going to be hybrid again. It will be held on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at noon. Stepping into Summer Health Fair is the next activity we'll be having in May, on May 20th, and it's going to be also on campus on the Rush Atrium building from 1 to 4 p.m., where you can join us on the dance floor for some Chicago-style stepping and salsa, in addition to experienced stepping and salsa instructors providing classes throughout the day. This health fair will include numerous health screenings and tables of information and services to support your well-being from our community partners and providers. And lastly, the next lecture is going to be on stress, aging, and well-being. That one is fully virtual, sorry. And so we hope to see you then. Once again, thank you so much.